Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. is upon us. This is a big ass fight in your neck of the woods overseas, man. These guys have been on Piers Morgan. For it might be hard for fans in the United States to grasp what a big deal this is because Chris Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn, they really were great fighters. Case in point, Nigel Benn beating Gerald McClellan, one of the United States' best in the fight of the year. Anyway, now it's their boys taking center stage, Raheem. You will be in the building this Saturday. Break it down a little bit for us, man. What are you expecting? What are you thinking heading into this fight?
The buildup initially, when the fight was first made, had a lot to do off the back of their father's legacy. It was the sons. How incredible is it that they're both top table fighters, that they both have an opportunity to meet each other, and the fathers have this storied past, and they were really not in the same weight division, really weren't on a collision course, didn't make a whole lot of sense in the boxing world for these guys to be fighting. They weren't even at the same stage of their career, but the money and the narrative was so salacious that you just had to force the fight together. And that's essentially what the buildup was in the first go round. And then when Conor Benn got busted for the PEDs and the fight was off, it became a different narrative. Then it became about whether or not Ben is a dirty fighter, whether or not his claims that he didn't take anything knowingly was true, whether or not it mattered if he took it knowingly or not. It was definitely in the system. All this stuff became a part of a much bigger narrative. And then, of course, ultimately he was cleared by the Boxing Board of Control, and he is now able to fight. And his record is, as far as his claim that he was not guilty of taking PEDs officially, I don't think he is. So the fight is no longer about the fathers and their legacy. The fight now is about the sons and their rivalry. Whether or not this is the kind of matchup that is going to pay in the ring the way the hype has paid outside the ring is a question that is still to be answered, of course. Sadly, I don't necessarily think there's a good chance that happens. I think we will have seen the best of this fight before the first bell rings.
Okay, I'm optimistic that it's an explosive fight that doesn't go the distance. That doesn't mean there won't be lulls in the action. I think both guys have enough holes in their game and yet are both dangerous enough to exploit each other's holes in the game that both guys could get hurt in this fight. I think somebody's getting hurt. I don't think we're going to get a snoozer. Um, they're both two fighters that rely a big part of why they're able to compete at the level they're at is just the gifts they got from their dads. But and heading into this fight originally, I remember I called. We talked about it on the phone after it really started to pop off with the egg. I said, man, Chris Eubank Jr. is going to wash Conor Benn. He's too little, right? Like just to oversimplify, he's too little. Then I really think you could pick a lot of fights wrong being lazy like that, and you can overthink a lot of fights by sinking your teeth into them too much too, and overthink it. I wound up I wound up changing my pick. I got Conor Benn, and I'll get to that more so later, but I wound up changing it to Conor Benn. Go ahead,
Okay.
Raheem.
What I like to remind people, and I say this all the time, how did you feel when the fight was first announced? Now, granted, this fight
I
has two
told you. I said he's too
announcements.
little. He's too little.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And how I felt when the fight was initially announced the first time was that, oh, this is a money grab. I understand why it's happening. I don't begrudge it. This is not actually an even fight. It's even potentially a mismatch.
Yep.
And it's just a fight that has such a sellable narrative that nobody can resist. Not the fighters, not the networks, not the promoters. We've just got to do this because it can be done. And the only person that was the outlier was Eubank Sr., who we will discuss later. I don't want to get too into that at the minute because he's a big factor to be discussed in this. However, the first thing I thought was mismatch, money grab. And
Yeah.
then all the rest of this narrative came behind the PD and the fight being called off. And then there was some actual, real, legitimate spite between these two fighters, and it wasn't just built off a hype. And then since that has occurred, we've seen so much from Conor Benn emotionally. You've seen him in the public go through. So whether you believe him or not, man, this guy stuck to his guns and he got the result ultimately that exonerated him. So if he played the system that well, is that great an actor and had it and Eddie Hearn and all the pool and everything that happened, and somehow this guy was actually guilty and got his exoneration anyway, credit to him. That's amazing. And if he isn't guilty and he went through all that, having been wrongly accused by some faulty test, and here we are with the fight back on, credit to him. Jesus, that's a lot to go through, and it's a tough thing to have to deal with in front of public, and you'll never completely get that off of your name or out of the conversation when you're discussed. You'll never get that out, no matter what happens or who says what. It's too baked in now. With all that said, we now have to find out what this has made of the man. Did it fortify him? I think he's got a better shot now than he had the first fight because it's a man and his will
Yeah.
in that ring as much as it is his physical talents or his weight or his acumen. The will of the fighter is what wins in those dark, deep moments. That mental game that anybody will tell you is 85% of boxing anyway cannot be overestimated. But that is what Ben is going to need to win this fight. He's got to want it so bad, so much that he can't imagine a reality where he doesn't get his hand raised at the end of those rounds, that he will accept no other conclusion. Because that, I believe, is how tall a building he has to climb to get over this hurdle. Chris Eubank Jr. is a massive hurdle for Conor Benn, and all the hype up until this moment has started to make the building and the climber seem the same height, and that it's an even 50-50. No, what it's even at is the promotion. They have both done their jobs. They have both made this a mega fight. But don't forget what you thought when it was first announced. Not a whole lot has changed since then.
No, it hasn't. And but at the same time, other people must be seeing what I'm seeing because Ben opened as a plus almost 300 underdog, maybe even more, maybe even slightly less, but he's now all the way down to less than plus 200, which means some money is coming in on Conor Benn late. Other people are, is it hype? Or some smart money coming in. Have some people like me watch the tape and see things that changed our minds a little bit as we sink our teeth deeper into it. It always goes one or two way. It could be the fight week hype and people overthinking these things, second guessing themselves, or it could be deeper analysis, bringing some smart money in on them. I think you talked about the will he has. My hunch is he has a little bit more dog and will than Chris Eubank Jr. The problem is that only comes into play when you can approximate the skill and the talent of the other guy. You could have all the will in the world. If it's a blowout from round one because he's just too good or too big, that will isn't really ever going to come into play. You gotta be able to compete with Chris Eubank Jr. first. Here's why I think he can. Zero meta, even in his last fight against Zero Meta, I think Chris Eubank Jr. he's gotten comfortable in his identity. He's never going to be the most technically sound guy. He relies on his twitchiness and his athleticism, the gifts he's inherited from his daddy, but he's found a way to get something out of it, working with Roy Jones and then Bo Mack over the years. He reminds me of a poor man's Roy Jones. He relies on that athleticism. He lives and dies by it, but there's a method to it now that is working for him. I see him with his up jab from his hip being more proficient with his jab than ever. Before, he was a guy that would sometimes crowd you, smother his own work, do some really ugly stuff that made Prince Nassim Ahmed want him to retire years ago. But I see him, he's rangier now, he's more creative, and he's more dynamic with his punch selection. His best punch is still the uppercut, but he does a lot of things with the up jab, and he has a different punch selection now, more creative punch selection to set up that uppercut. You don't see it coming as much. He's got a better jab than Conor Benn. He's a bigger guy than Conor Benn. But I see Conor Benn keeps his hands up better than Chris Eubank Jr. Chris Eubank Jr. inherited some of that creativity from Roy Jones, but he also inherited not being technically sound from training with Roy Jones. And he dropped Zero Meta in round one of his last fight. By the end of the round, he's getting hit with the right hand. And he doesn't really do anything defensively to get out of the way of shots. He either just pulls out of range or the reflexes bail him out a little bit. The problem is this isn't Liam Smith, this isn't Liam Williams, this isn't Zero Meta. This is an athletic guy too who's inherited some gifts from his dad, just like he has. So I think he can challenge him and match him in some of those areas of speed and quickness and athleticism. And Eubank, because of his lack of defensive nuance beyond his reflexes, he's a sucker for the right hand. And that's Conor Benn's best shot. Now, Conor Benn will jump in with that shot a little bit. Conor Benn, like I said, he doesn't have as good a jab as Chris Eubank. He'll jump in naked with the lead right hand, try to follow it up with a big left hook, explosive shots. But I think his balance is a little bit better. Sometimes Eubank, when he pulls back from his back foot, again, that chin is there. Conor Benn is not defensively super proficient either, but he keeps his hands up better and he's got a little bit better balance. I think he can get the job. I think he can get the job done. What do you think, Raheem? What are you laughing about?
I'm not laughing. I am entertained
Yeah, good, good. I
because
hope the audience
my
is too.
favorite thing about talking to you, which I will do at any opportunity, of how people execute their talents and gifts in this sport. However, it's a mismatch, Sean.
Hmm.
On
Just
paper,
is, huh?
there's nothing that says this fight should even be happening if we're
Yeah.
honest about what we're actually looking at. And I don't even have the slightest bit of surprise that the narrowing of the margin in the betting, because this is an emotional fight. There are people who are betting about so many different things, and they want one of these two guys to win, depending on where their heart lies and who their fathers were and where the argument settles on their shoulders, whether or not they hate Ben and think he's a drug cheat, or they can't wait for somebody to humiliate Chris Eubank because he's an asshole. Whatever they're betting on, it's not what's on paper. What's on paper is that this is not only a mismatch, but should be a relatively easy night for Chris Eubank Jr. All the things you said about them, respectively, as the way that their technique is proficient and where their holes are and all that shit is true, but not when they're faced off one against the other.
Yeah.
Because Chris Eubank fights at another level, has competed at a completely another level of the sport, has far more experience than Eubank than Ben has the weight advantage. The only thing that is potentially a detriment is the age, and Eubank's only 35. I mean, it's not a spring chicken, as you know, but it's also not 40. 35 is still, you should still be able to operate. I'm not seeing him slipping at 35 where it's like, oh, maybe this is a guy who's on the decline. So where does Eubank have a challenge? I think it's here. Does he want it as? That's why I brought Will into the equation, because that's really the only dynamic that we don't know for sure who's going to prevail. Yes, to your point, you have to make all of those technical aspects of your fight and your ability to challenge the opponent before the will comes into it. I'm not even entirely sure that I agree with that, because this is where you can dare to be great, where you can do things you shouldn't be able to do because you want to get it done so bad. And that's what Ben is going to have to do, what he shouldn't be able to do. None of this fight breakdown that you gave, I don't think, is relevant to his opponent. If it was somebody in his class, somebody in his weight division, somebody who had less experience or even more experience, but still in his class and in his weight division, then maybe this makes more sense to me. To
Right.
me, we're talking about two guys on two different levels and what they do at their level. But
Yeah.
when you bring this guy up to this guy, don't forget the first fight, it was Eubank who was having to come down another 3 pounds.
Yeah.
Now he's gotten that back in negotiation. He gets to rehydrate 10 pounds, which is what he was going to do anyway. Even the rehydration clause is not a terrible burden on Eubank. He's going to be comfortable in there. He fights at 160. They're talking up this draining thing because it helps make the fight sellable. But the truth is, Ben is at every disadvantage possible except age, and Eubank's not even old.
Right.
So he's going to have to do something he should not be able to do, no matter what the odds say, no matter how they've shrunk, no matter what his father did, no matter anything, unless he really is on PEDs and has somehow figured out how to swerve the test this time, which
Well,
would be his best chance of making all this stuff you say matter. Which I'm not saying that's the case by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying that if that were the case, then maybe he's got a better shot. But if not, he's going to have to not just dare to be great by taking this fight, but actually be great to win it. And the only thing that is going to push him over that line is the will to win. And can't wait to see if he has that much, because I don't see a world in which he can accept defeat. That is true. I've sat with him. I like him. I believe in him as a young man and a guy who absolutely is a warrior. And he doesn't see a world in which on April 27th, he is not the undefeated victor and the carrier of his legacy. As the only way it could happen is that Conor Benn wins this fight in Conor Benn's mind. I don't know if that's true for Eubank, except for Eubank, I believe, just takes for granted everything I just said because he knows what I just said is true. And he's
the
like,
mismatch. The dude's just not on my level. So
yeah,
it's
so
not going to come
maybe,
down to all this crazy character stuff, and it's a blowout.
yes,
It's a route from you guys will see. It's a route from round one. It's a mismatch. He's too
yes.
little, and he's not good enough. Yeah.
So maybe if what you just said is what's going through Eubank's mind, which is what I believe is true, and that is met with this unwithering determination,
Oh
this
shit! Now I am in a fight.
undeniable will, and then he finds himself in a tougher fight, or maybe Eubank catch. It's not like Conor Benn is some massive puncher, even at his own weight in his
No,
own weight class.
what's
Like,
most indicting about Conor Benn with this PED stuff? And by the way, I always do wonder for your Conor Benns or your Ryan Garcias. I wonder if any part of them wants to blurt out to us, yeah, I fucking took it. Guess what? All your favorite fighters do. I just got caught. But they can't say that. Anyways, what's so
and that's a conversation for another day, but it is a conversation.
yes, but what's so indicting about Conor Benn getting busted with this stuff and his last two fights have went the distance ever since he's had to come back, we believe for sure off this stuff, right? Is they both fights went the distance. He was a guy who was starting to jump off the screen and get our attention, not because his feints, not because his counter punching, not because his technical brilliance, because of his explosiveness was starting to jump off the screen. And if that's your calling card and it was enhanced, that's not good news for you. It's one thing if your calling card again is your counterpunching, your technical skills, your defense, your timing, your IQ. No, Conor Benn was making a name for himself because he was blasting dudes out of there with a lot of speed and power. And all of a sudden, that speed and power hasn't quite been the same, or at the least produced the same results it was before you got busted. So now you got to go up two weight classes. How's that going to look? You haven't been hurting guys at 47 the way. By the way, a big reason why I thought this was going to be a mismatch, I covered his last fight in Vegas, grilled him, did a proper job, yeah. Did a proper job grilling him and Eddie, right? Did my job, but he went almost life and death with a domestic level fighter. Usually when we say domestic level fighter, we're talking about over there. UK. No, Pistol Pete Dobson is a domestic level fighter in America. He's an American. Good timing. He's a solid professional, a competent pro, good timing. Anyways, Conor Benn went life and death with him. So how's he go from going life and death with a domestic level welterweight to moving up and beating a legit world has never been. I don't know if either one of them will ever be world champion, but at least Chris Eubank fought for the world title against Billy Joe Saunders, beat former world
He's
champions like Liam Smith. But I don't know. I
Yeah,
think I can only go off. Go ahead.
regional fighters were competitive with Ben,
Yeah,
and you're right to say that the results haven't been the same. And why that is the case, we will leave it to others to decide. However, that's just the truth of it.
yeah.
What have we seen from Conor Benn to make us believe that a fighter of his caliber and what he's produced, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the indifferent, what have we seen to make us think that he can jump two weight classes and beat a more seasoned veteran who has fought and competed and won, and however, not a world championship, but on a global stage? He's
Allow me.
giving away too many factors. He
This is
is
how he
at
wins,
too
Raheem.
many disadvantages. And the only way he wins is if he is mentally so strong and Eubank is so matter of fact about maybe, believe it or not, underestimating Ben's will to win or taking for granted how easy this fight is going to be. And those two things cross sect at the same time. Or Eubank gets old overnight, and it's Connor Benn's night to be great. Uh,
Maybe that right hand is getting launched at him a little bit quicker than your Zero Metas who was hitting him with it, and your Liam Smiths, and maybe that dog, like you said, the younger, fresher guy, like you said, is a little hungrier, got a little bit more. When the going gets tough, maybe Connor Benn's the guy who gets going. Maybe Connor Benn's the guy willing to punch with Chris Eubank, not just wait for the right moments to pick his spots. Maybe he's willing to go blow for blow with Chris Eubank, and Chris Eubank only wants to find the moments that are advantageous to him to do that. And so maybe his base is a little more balanced. Maybe that right hand that Eubank's a sucker for comes crashing in a little bit. Maybe Connor Benn withstands the early onslaught. Maybe he weathers the storm in the first 4 rounds and we get this thing really going. And I could see I'll go on the limb. I do have Connor Benn by upset. Um,
to me, it's a more massive upset than will be spoken of if Ben wins. And if he does win, which I'm not saying he can't, I'm just saying by all estimation of what we know, he shouldn't,
right.
which is the difference between good and great. You win these fights you shouldn't win. So he has the opportunity on the night, and we'll see. However, if he does, it's a massive upset. It is not a 50-50 fight. It is not a 60-40 fight. This is like an 80-20 fight. I thought it was like a mismatch before Eubank got even more advantages. And whether or not you talk about the onslaught, do you think that Ben has the discipline and the emotional calmness to just go in there and execute the game plan and be patient and wait for his spots or be aggressive only when it's advantageous? I don't think so. I think that he is going to be emotionally charged, that he is going to try to go in there and
And run
take
into
it
some
to
shit.
Eubank immediately because he knows no matter what he says that weight does matter, that this is an older fighter, that maybe he can overwhelm him early, that maybe that's a great shot for him to get something in like Liam Smith did and set Eubank down and change the narrative of this fight right out the gate. I think that's a great potential game plan. The problem is, no matter what game plan Ben goes in with, he's up against a massive number of disadvantages no matter what he chooses. I don't think that's a bad strategy, honestly. Let's out there and see if maybe you can just steal this from him right out the gate. And don't forget, there's a two fight. There's a two-fight deal. There's a fucking rematch clause for Christ's sake. Like, and there's another thing I say. I don't think if Eubank wins this fight in the way that on paper he should, we even see the second fight. So you just have to remember that all the things that Ben has been through since the accusation, we have to call it accusation of performance enhancing drugs, and then his um, exoneration has all emotional content. He has never been through anything like that before in his life on the global stage. And all of that can either help him in this determination or hurt him in his overzealous desire to prove everybody wrong. And
Yeah.
I think that Chris Eubank is a seasoned operator who is much easier at, or I should say, much better at manipulating than Ben is. I think like Eubank is just twisting the knobs, turning the nipples, pushing the dials, and
Man
and
versus a
and and,
boy
and needling this guy.
psychologically,
He's
man versus a boy psychologically, and it may look like a man versus the boy on the night too. Size wise, experience wise, craft wise.
He's gonna use
Yes.
all that against him, all that emotion,
Yeah.
all that aggression. Like, he knows what he's doing in there.
Yeah.
And so it's a difficult challenge for you, Bank.
Hold up.
If the things are true,
You're freezing up a little bit in spots. Go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, if the things I say about him are true, it should be a fairly routine night. It shouldn't be. Uh, he's not going to be fighting for his life in there.
But if he
I would
is,
like to.
but if it turns into that, that's where you egging, see what I did there, egging Conor Benn on a little bit. That's where it backfires, is when you give the other guy something extra. When it but
That's the will.
yes. But Conor Benn's got to get him to that point. That's the hard part. When you're the fighter who has more will and you're the underdog, the hard part is just getting him to the part in the fight where that really starts to matter. But if you can't get past the talent gap, the skill gap, you can't execute that will. If Conor Benn can get this fight to really become a fight, I think that's where bitch slapping him with the egg backfires a little bit.
Do you think Ben should come out as aggressive as possible, try to
He's going to.
overwhelm? But do you think he should? Because I think that might be his best shot. Like to just
He's
start
going
as
to.
fast as possible,
That's him.
but
That's what he
not
does in
super.
every fight. He comes out, he wings the right hand, then he slows down, then he gets second and third wins, and on we go. Like he's definitely gonna come and chuck that right hand at his temple. Like he's definitely gonna do that. The if
Can he
Ben
do it
can take it,
responsibly?
nah,
Can,
he ain't fucking Floyd Mayweather, bro. Like he's not Bernard Hopkins. Yeah, he'll throw it.
he's
He knows how to throw a right hand. He's not gonna throw it Ricardo Mayorga style. He throws some good right hands. Sometimes he sweeps it, sometimes he shoots it down the pipe. He's gonna wing it. He's gonna have to
he's
be able
gonna
to take what Eubanks got. If he could take what Eubanks got early, then he's in business. He's
he's gonna have to be what we've never seen him be before. He's going to have to fight at a level we've never seen him execute at before. And Eubank to win this fight can just have a decent night. He doesn't even have to be the best Eubank, the best version of Eubank to win this fight. And again, it is not because if all things were equal, this would be true. It is because he has so many advantages in the fight that is what is true. So, Ben fans might feel that it's disrespect or underestimating Ben. It's not. It's simply that the guy has signed up for a mismatch
hmm
in everything but age. There's not another category where you say he's really got an advantage. Maybe you say speed, but I say timing and beat speed.
Yeah, and I don't think he's faster than Eubank. I just think he challenges him in that area the way these last couple of guys, Smith, Williams, and Zirameta can't. Those guys aren't athletic. So that it's not so much I think he's faster than Eubank. I just think he can make him pay for relying on his own athleticism too much because hey, I've actually got a lot of that too. That so
And you better be heavy-handed. I mean, I think he might be faster than Eubank actually, but is the pop there with the speed? And I think Eubank counters the speed with timing and positioning. He's going to be a calm, smooth operator. He's going to be there on time. He's going to, you know what I mean? If you're a step ahead of the guy, then how fast the guy is won't matter because you're already a step ahead. He's playing catch up with that speed. That's what I fear will happen,
but you're used to being
even
a
if
step
if
ahead.
Ben uses his speed.
Part of why he's used to having a step ahead of these last couple guys is that athleticism gap. And if you're able to touch and pull out with your chin exposed, because those guys are going to fall short. They're a little too slow. They can't close the gap quick enough. Conor Benn will fuck around and just jump in with the right hand. He'll close the gap. It might be reckless, and if Eubank is smart, he'll run him into something trying to do that. But if he tries to just pull out with that chin exposed, Conor Benn might be explosive enough to close the gap and make him pay for doing that. So that's what has me from a stylistic standpoint intrigued in this fight, is the both of these guys got their daddy's gifts. It's just one guy's a lot bigger, one guy's a lot more experienced, one guy's fought much better opposition, but the other guy is younger, fret, and maybe a little hungrier, and maybe I know you're not buying into this weight stuff, but maybe maybe there's a chance it does work against Eubank Jr. Eubank Jr. was saying he's only 60% at 57. I know he's selling potentially, but if you're 60% at 57, maybe you're only 85, 90, 80% at 160. Maybe that affects your punch resistance. And again, maybe that punch resistance hasn't really been taken advantage of because these last couple guys have been too slow to get to you. Maybe this kid, even if he's not a big puncher, if those legs are a little weak because you're a little gaunt at 60, then maybe, maybe the impact of Ben's power surprises us in this fight because Eubank is a little bit more drained than he's leading on. And maybe Ben, sometimes fighters they lose a little something cutting weight. Maybe there's a chance he surprises us a little bit with the impact in his shots in this fight. But if I'm
I
wrong, I
want
won't. I'll be like, what was I? Sometimes I gotta chuck the tape out the window. Sometimes that tape does us dirty.